In the small town of Kutch, nestled near the edge of the Great Rann, tales are told of a strange phenomenon, a spirit known as or the Shadow Lady, who is said to haunt the salt marshes under the full moon. Amit and his friends had heard these tales growing up, but dismissed them as village folklore. One winter, they decided to camp out by the edge of the marsh, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious lights that supposedly flickered over the salt flats at night. They set up their tents and built a fire, laughing off the old stories, the thrill of a ghost hunt adding to their excitement. As night fell, the marshlands turned eerily silent, the usual calls of birds and insects falling into an unnatural hush. A dense fog rolled in, reflecting the moonlight in a ghostly glow over the salt flats. Amit's friend Ravi suddenly grew quiet, staring into the distance. "Do you see that?" he whispered. Far across the marsh, they saw a faint bluish light moving, almost like a lantern bobbing through the fog. The friends squinted, trying to make out the source. As they watched, the light grew brighter and seemed to be coming toward them, casting an unsettling, ghostly glow across the empty marshland. Despite their nerves, curiosity got the best of them, and they decided to follow the light. As they walked across the hard, cracked ground of the salt flats, the light seemed to pull them deeper and deeper into the fog, always just out of reach. Finally, they stopped, realizing they had ventured far from their campsite. They tried to retrace their steps, but the fog had grown thicker, obscuring their sense of direction. That's when they heard it, a soft, humming sound, almost like a lullaby, carried on the cold night wind. They turned, and there she was. Standing just a few meters away was a woman dressed in a white sari, her long dark hair cascading over her face, barely revealing the outline of her features. Her skin was as pale as the moonlight, and she seemed to be floating just above the ground, her feet barely touching the salt crust beneath her. Terrified, the friends stood frozen as the woman began to move toward them, her gaze locked on Amit. He felt as if her eyes were pulling him in, an invisible force rooting him to the spot. Her lips moved, but no words came out, just a hollow, empty silence that filled the air. As she drew closer, Ravi grabbed Amit's arm, breaking the trance. They all turned and ran as fast as they could, not daring to look back. The haunting sound of her humming followed them, growing fainter with each step, until they finally stumbled back to their campsite, gasping for breath and drenched in sweat. When they caught their breath, they checked their phones and watches, only to find that hours had passed, though they'd only felt like they were gone for a few minutes. They packed up their things and left, never speaking of the incident again. Back in town, they told an elder about what they'd seen. The old man listened, nodding knowingly. He told them the story of a woman from decades past who had lost her husband in the salt marshes during a storm. Driven mad with grief, she had wandered the flats, calling out for him until she, too, disappeared. "She searches for lost souls," he told them, "and if you hear her song, she will try to take you into the marsh, so you never find your way back." To this day, Amit avoids the Rann of Kutch at night. And on rare occasions, when he thinks back on that night, he can almost hear the faintest echo of a haunting lullaby drifting on the wind. The eerie salt flats of the Rann of Kutch add a haunting backdrop to this tale. With a blend of mystery and ghostly encounters, it taps into Gujarat's rich and mystical atmosphere. Hope you enjoyed it. Make the background music horror.